We just heard about art and technology, and now we're going to look at how art can be a tool for healing and resilience. Sasha Samuels is an American artist whose work developed as a response to the war in Ukraine. She traveled to Lviv with her paintbrushes and created portraits of wounded soldiers, honoring their dignity and sacrifice. She's gone on to support advocacy, children's healing, and major exhibitions around the world. Please join me in welcoming Sasha Samuels.
Thank you, Noom, for hosting me, and thank you, Jeff, for inviting me. Okay, so I'm not Ukrainian, I'm not Ukrainian American. As far as I know, I have no Ukrainian blood in these veins. But when Russia conducted its full-scale invasion in February of 2022, it really hit me like a storm. I spent a lot of time in Europe. I lived in Italy off and on my whole life, and I really didn't want to see anything happen to Europe. And so I started donating money to World Central Kitchen and some other NGOs that were doing humanitarian work, but it didn't feel like I was doing enough. I felt like I had to do more. And I wondered if I could do something using my art, using my own unique skills and talents. And then I came across this image on Instagram, of all places, by Marta Sirko. She's a photographer, a young woman living in Lviv. And she was also trying to think about ways that she could use her art to help her community and help her country and the individuals, mainly gentlemen at the front who were getting these incredible injuries from mines and such. And she wanted to reframe their beauty, kind of like kintsugi, where you get a favorite bowl and it's beautiful and it breaks, and you want to save it, so you repair it and then you paint the cracks with gold. So she wanted to be a mirror to these gentlemen to say, you're still incredibly beautiful. Your beauty has just changed. And she was inspired very much by the Greco-Roman sculptures of antiquity in the Louvre and elsewhere. And so that's how I wound up in a bomb shelter in Lviv. It was quite an adventure. This was our dog listening to a shahed over the roof. This was my first time in a war zone. Now, this is a video that the original is about 4 minutes long. I've reduced it to about a 1-minute clip because I just wanted you to, rather than just seeing the news on television or seeing something in a magazine or a newspaper, I wanted you to get a felt sense of the trauma that this community is dealing with. This is a memorial that's created in the center of Kyiv, and every flag represents somebody at the front who is fighting or is missing in action or in a Russian prison. This is just 1 minute of that clip. So this gives you the sense of scale. Every one of these photographs or bouquets of flowers or flags represents a loved one, and they have left a family or loved one behind who is dealing with the stress of this. And it's not like a single stressful event like a car accident. It's every day, is a missile gonna hit my residential building? Is my loved one gonna make it back home okay? And here you'll see soon on a wall, there have been people who've been posting artwork. And this entire collective memorial, to me, it's like a collaborative artwork in and of itself. And it's where people can go and be a part of community and mourn together rather than in isolation. And part of the mourning process, part of the healing process is grieving in community. We heal in community. Again, this video, the original is 4 minutes long. It did not cover the entire memorial. This went on and on. And again, you can see some artwork where people are managing their trauma and honoring their loved ones. So I got this idea, really inspired by Marta Sirko's photography, to take my watercolors and go to Lviv. And I had no appointments. I was told I wasn't even allowed into military hospitals. I found a host family by, being very determined. I found a host family in Lviv who would take care of me. And I wound up at 2 facilities, primarily Superhumans and Unbroken. And before I even got to the facility, I got a text message from a woman named Yulia saying, we're from Suspilne Television and we would like to interview you. We heard you're going to be painting our guys. And I thought, wow, my goal was to help 10 guys go home like, okay, I survived, I'm good, I did a good deed. And here I was going to be on their national television. So of course I agreed. And this was one of the features. And then the next morning, I received another text message from Yulia, different phone number, saying, hey, we heard you're going to be at Unbroken facility. We want to interview you there. And I said, this is lovely. Your interview yesterday went so well. I'd be pleased that you would interview me again. And she said, what are you talking about? It was a different television station. And we figured out that my work touched about 8 million Ukrainians. It was pretty, it was a powerful message for me that my art could really help transform. And the tipping point for me, I was following a brigade of international volunteers, sort of loosely, and one of the individuals was trying to raise money for some equipment, and he was an IT professional. He wrote code for a living, and he was raising money for a sniper rifle. We all know people that write code. Can you imagine them becoming, now they're a sniper? It just blew me away. And we live in Silicon Valley, and so it hit me even harder. And he said, when people on the outside donate and they help us, we know that they care, and that's what keeps us going. I closed my laptop, I cried my eyes out, and I said, that's it, I'm going. So this is one of the individuals whom I painted. His name is Serhi. He had a frozen knee joint that over time they discovered they really couldn't re-articulate. So he opted for an amputation. As I give this lecture, he's at the front lines. He's manning a radar station. A lot of these guys who've recovered, they've gone right back to the front. And then these are some of the other portraits. I've done about 26 portraits so far. And I should mention, each portrait I gifted to that man to say, I'm here, I honor you, I see the sacrifices that you're making, and I celebrate you, and I celebrate your beauty. Now this last gentleman, his name is Volodymyr, and there's a Slavic sense of humor that if you're from New York or you've been in New York, there's a little bit of dark humor. These guys are masters at that. So he said to me, are you afraid to get into a car driven by a guy with one leg? And I said, well, I'm from New York. I'm not afraid of anything. And he said, well, my friends are having an art exhibition this evening, and I'd like to take you. And I said, great. I'll pick you up at 6. I'm imagining a car is going to pick me up at 6. This is what arrived. He had his friends trick out this camouflage for his daily driver. This is not a car that's going to the front line. This is his daily driver. It's got beautiful cream leather interior, burled wood, dashboard. And this is the first object that I saw in the exhibition. Zirka Savka was the person who painted this object. And this was my first introduction in person to trench art, where somebody could take a bomb or a helmet or some bullet casings and transform them into artwork like kintsugi on steroids. And her friend here, Oleg, was killed at the front before the project could be completed. So she completed it in homage to him. And what was really fascinating is if you brought along your smartphone, there was a QR code that you could scan, and this is what would pop up. Zirka created a virtual reality background, and this row of eyes symbolized all the fallen soldiers, all of the brothers in arms, in the clouds in heaven watching over them, mixed with this black smoke from the war. And it was then that I decided, wow, this needs an international audience. This should really be in a museum somewhere. So I contacted someone I knew in Santa Fe at the Museum of International Folk Art, because a lot of these artists weren't professional artists that were creating these objects or repurposing these objects. And I thought, this is perfect. I also came across the work of Christina Valco's students. She is helping children who have all seen missile fire or lost loved ones at the front. And so they're taking these ammunition casings and shells and painting them. So the good news is the museum got the funding. We had a very short runway. We had 6 months to put a major museum exhibition together. We had to have all the objects certified in Ukraine as non-explosive and then recertified through a different process, a different group of people, to certify them as art objects. And I found out that the backlog, there was a 6-month waiting list to get these things taken care of. And so I was even in touch with the deputy mayor of Lviv, and I said, you know, can you call a guy who knows a guy and just get this done? And they said, no, we can't. Plus, we're trying to get objects out of a war zone. I mean, there were a lot of complexities. But a gal knew a guy, one of the artists in the exhibition. She knew of a policeman who would go into buildings that had been hit by missiles or Shahed drones and check for unexploded munitions. And so he agreed to certify everything immediately. And so we got everything certified and out. Some of the objects arrived just a couple days before the exhibition was hung. There was a lot of nail biting, but we did it. We pulled it off. And these are some of the objects. In the upper right-hand corner, that was painted on an ammunition box, the lid. And in classic kind of iconographic Ukrainian folk tradition, there would be a saint, maybe surrounded with stars. This is the saint of the drone operator, and he's surrounded by little FPV drones. Zirka Savka, who painted that canister, we commissioned her to create this graphic called Family that was used on the invitation and in the entryway. The vest here was a family heirloom. It was the artist's great-grandfather. She was pregnant when the bombs started falling. And so she just got out. She evacuated and went to Italy. In Venice, she found these beads, and she just started processing her trauma by beating the explosions and the missiles coming in. But also because she was pregnant, she added the stork who delivers babies. And the stork happens also to be the flower, the national bird of Ukraine. The eggs are sort of reminiscent of the painted Ukrainian eggs pisanke. The same artist did these sunflowers, and he said when he first received the box of these shells, these bullet casings, he physically couldn't touch them. If he tried to touch them, his hands felt like they were burning. But over time, he just confronted like exposure therapy a little at a time, and finally he was able to hold them and use them and work them into these objects. And these are the tubes that the children painted that you saw earlier. This is how we displayed them in a group. So when I got back to America, word spread locally in the Ukrainian American community that I'd done these things. And so they kind of roped me into their advocacy. And one of the first things they did was they invited me to see a screening of Porcelain War, which if you haven't seen it, if you're interested in the arts, human resilience, art therapy, this is your film. It was nominated for an Academy Award. It was exquisite. It was created by 3 artists who had never held a video camera in their lives. They were sent the camera. They were given instructions over Zoom. They were sent body armor because some of the filming was going to be in some rough areas. And then the very difficult passages of the film were shown in animation. So it would be a little easier to take on board. And you could bring kids to this film. And I got to meet Slava at the opening, and his little dog Frodo also featured prominently in the film. Then by the same group, I was invited to go to a rally in DC, a summit for Ukraine. And I said, well, I've always voted, but I'm not really politically active that way. I'm an artist, I kind of let others do that. And I'm not Ukrainian, what would I be doing there? And he said, well, the fact that you're not Ukrainian, actually, your voice matters even more. So I said, well, if you think I can bring value, if I can be of use, I'll go. I'm gonna trust you. And 650 of us went to DC. We had 450 meetings. with congressmen and senators in about 2 days, 2.5 days. So it was very effective. And I had been told beforehand that we were allowed to bring small gifts to our legislators, and they needed to be, $20 or less, and that the best gift you could bring would be children's artwork, because historically those pieces were really sort of coveted and people really connected with them. And so that night I emailed a couple I've been doing Zooms with who were artists over there working with children. They've worked with over 4,000 children on a volunteer basis so far. And I said, I need some kids' artwork and I need permission slips from their parents to print these. And here's Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, who met with us holding one of the kids' artwork. So I printed them up quickly, dropped them into pre-cut mats, put them in a plastic sleeve, and brought 40 of them to the Hill, and then I dispersed them among all the advocates. I also got to meet Nobel Peace Laureate Oleksandr Matvichuk. So again, when I started this journey, my goal was to help 10 guys, and next thing I know, this woman is giving me her business card because I told her I was going back to Ukraine in a couple weeks, and she said, well, let's have coffee. And I got to spend about an hour with her in Kyiv when I returned. This piece was done by a 12-year-old. She was in the hospital when missiles were landing in her town. This is done by another 12-year-old. You can see she's painting a mural of sunflowers and the stork, the national symbols of Ukraine, on a broken wall. Her cat is helping her, so she's obviously got an emotional support animal. And even though there's a broken building in the background, their flag still stands. So this is how these children are processing their war trauma. The most poignant for me was this one, and this is the one I chose to give to Pelosi. The child chose to paint the background black. You can see her world is surrounded in darkness. There are children behind the school. It's not clear to me whether that's a cemetery or not, but these children to me look very ghost-like. And while she's smiling and her face is black, if you look in her eyes, there's a sad face. There are two little frowns. So my goodness, a lot going on there. And the women who sent me these images are working with the children on murals as well as these smaller personal pieces. And I was thinking, okay, these children really contributed to their nation's advocacy in Washington, D.C. There must be a way I can leverage that. And so I got this idea of creating these very official-looking certificates. Nova Ukraine, the NGO, agreed to sign off on it as absolutely official. And I printed them up, and I hand calligraphied the children's names in there, and I brought them with me the next time I went to Ukraine. And they look pretty happy, and they look pretty proud. And this is how I thought I could help them rebuild a sense of agency, because when missiles are landing or your dad's at the front, you're a child. Like, the adults are in charge, you don't have a voice, you're not in control. But here they were able to rebuild some sense of agency. And then, broke my heart. The women that I worked with who helped with this project, Natalia and her daughter, Justina, they knew I had one extra certificate left, and they asked me very sheepishly if I could make one for them. And of course I did. My next big project really started a year ago. I was invited to submit a proposal to do an artwork that would be inspired by the Renaissance master Ghiberti, who created a set of bronze doors on the baptistry in Florence, and each panel depicts a scene in the Old Testament. And given that a lot of the Russian propaganda that we'd been hearing is, oh, Ukrainians, you're like our little Russians, you're our brothers, we just want you back in the fold. Well, it made me think of Cain and Abel, so I chose that as my panel, but I flipped the script. And I created this. And I know someone talked about, can we create artwork that will sort of bring value, bring healing? And that's exactly what my intention was with this piece. When I was over there, I saw a lot of burned out and broken buildings and things. And as an artist, you don't get to see that very often. You don't get to be in a war zone very often. And I thought, ooh, I should paint these. And I mentioned that to one of the soldiers I'd painted, and he didn't look good. And so I said, or maybe I should paint Ukraine's post-war Renaissance. And he said, paint that, paint that. And so I did. And each of the figures is an individual who works at Superhumans. So this individual, his name is Dennis. We went horseback riding together. He's a triple amputee. He lost both legs and an arm in the war. And he's actually gone horseback riding without his prosthetic legs, and even turned around and sat backwards on the horse. So they're learning balance, they're learning confidence. You know, they have spotters on either side of the horse, so they're safe. And there was one story I heard of a soldier who, he was really in a deep depression. Nothing seemed to be able to break it. And his friends sort of coerced him to come horseback riding, even if he just watched. And finally, he got the courage to get up on a horse. And immediately, he started pointing to the able-bodied people at the stable and said, ha, you only have 2 legs, I have 4. I'm so much faster than you. And started sort of trotting off. And his depression broke. You remember Serhi? I wanted to place him just up on a ridge where he could see clearly, and he was just relaxed and comfortable. This gentleman is from the United Kingdom. He volunteered to deliver medical supplies and humanitarian aid to the front and then bring out civilians and injured soldiers. He was in a medic van that was clearly marked with a big cross on the roof, and their vehicle was tracked down by a Russian drone and exploded. Everyone survived, but obviously he lost limbs. His whole left side was gone. And he said, you know, when people ask me how I am, I say, I'm all right, because he lost everything on the left. So, you know, the dark humor there it's on steroids, and, you know, you just have to roll with it. He used to cross oceans. He crossed the Atlantic Ocean 9 times, crewing a sailboat. And he thought, you know, I'm never going to sail again. And I said, oh, honey, if anybody is going to sail again, it's going to be you. And within 3 or 4 months, he was sailing. And his goal now is to open a nonprofit that helps amputees learn how to sail. And in terms of the tableau itself, the composition is designed very loosely on the original Cain and Abel piece. The first thing I wanted to do, and what I've learned about in recovery from trauma, is you have to have a safe space. You have to have a safe container. So I wanted to create a bucolic landscape where it felt very spacious, very open, very safe. But I didn't want to be all Pollyanna about it, like nothing happened. So you'll see these kind of broken shards in the middle. And, you know, part of recovering from trauma is to acknowledge that, yeah, this bad thing happened, but it happened within a broader picture. I'm safe now, there's peace now. And so they could integrate that trauma experience into their well-being as they reconstruct themselves. I also wanted to acknowledge the grief, because oftentimes when we're going through trauma recovery, the first thing we have to do after we feel safe is to mourn the loss. And so in the upper right-hand corner, I have the cemetery. So anybody recovering from trauma, particularly in Ukraine, they can look at this, and if they're in that grieving mode, they can see that cemetery and they can activate that loss. Social support, we heal in community. Sometimes we read a book alone, or we work with a therapist one-on-one. But when we get that good psychosocial support, it can really help us heal, especially if we're in a society that has been wounded collectively. So we get to heal collectively. And so that's why I wanted multiple figures in here. And I've put Dennis on this white horse, symbol of kind of purity and strength. Found out later, St. George and the Dragon, St. George is always on a white horse, and he's one of the patron saints of Ukraine. So that was just great serendipity. And there's a long pathway ahead of him. He's future focused. He's trying new things. And again, these are all the stages. And you'll notice the composition is very circular, because we don't heal in a straight line. We have to go back and grieve. We have to go back a little deeper to get the healing to go deeper and to really take. Also on the far right is an image of Olha. And she is a social worker at Superhumans. And she is, dancing, she's making music, because we know that those things can help us drive trauma out of the body, especially movement therapy. And the gentleman in the blue shirt, he's referred to as kind of the court jester at Superhumans. He just runs around high energy, checking in, making sure that people are okay. And you'll see he's able-bodied, but the amputee is the one helping him up, which is psychologically empowering the amputees. So, advocacy in Europe. This piece was obviously chosen for the exhibition. It was in Palazzo Vecchio, which blew our minds that we were able to actually create this group show in Palazzo Vecchio, right next to the Uffizi Gallery. Over 20,000 people attended across 11 days. That also blew our minds. And a lot of us just stood with our artwork and told our stories, and each little panel descriptor had a QR code so people could dive in deeper. And people were scanning those codes all over. There were 37 artworks. Mine was the only one about Ukraine. The subject matter was kind of all over the board. But I met a lot of Ukrainian refugees who happened to be in Italy, and we had some really deep conversations. And I probably spoke with over 100 people and told my stories of my experiences there in Ukraine. One of the most poignant moments for me was a little girl. When I was talking to a gentleman, a little girl walked up who looked just like the little girl in the tableau. And she just stood there and just stared at it for minutes. And I assumed I was talking with her dad, and she was just waiting for dad to finish up with me. And so he wandered off, and she kept standing there. And I thought, this is interesting. And then she turned to me and said, I am Ukrainian. And I said, well, this painting is for you. This painting is for you and your people. You're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And the entire exhibition for me also was a validation of my experiences as an artist, that art can heal. It's been an incredible journey. It's not over. And that's it. Thank you so much for listening.
First of all, it is so inspiring, I have to say. So, are you going to continue this in other war-torn areas of the world? Like, are you inspired by the framework that you've approached with this situation?
I've thought about it, and it feels too dispersive. About a year ago, the best piece of advice I got, which I'm happy to share with you all, was when we got a new president, and we got hit with a kind of firestorm of all these different aspects of our government being assaulted. I'll just say it. Science, the arts, freedom of speech, everything. I was advised to pick one thing that you're interested in, that you're good at, and just stick with that one thing and meet your people who are in that community, and you'll get a synergy going and you'll get things done. I feel like with this particular war, I feel like I can make a difference. For instance, the tragedy that's been unfolding for way too long in Gaza and Palestine. If I went there, I don't think I could make any difference. I just don't think that culture could relate with me. So I'm continuing to support Ukraine. I'm just sticking with my one thing. I've got journalist friends at the front in trenches. I've got people raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for evacuation vehicles. So that synergistic pot is where I want to stay. And also, I'm very connected to Europe, and I don't want to see Europe fall. Ukraine is the firewall. And it's also the first trauma-informed war. So there's a lot going on there. I'm not an art therapist, and other than Christine Valco, all the other artists who are helping, they're not art therapists. We're just being driven by our intuition. And some of us are pioneering new forms of art therapy in Ukraine.
So you kind of approached my second question, which is, did you seek out counsel from professionals to help you understand the kind of approach to trauma? No, I'm experientially trauma informed, and so yes, I would say
I worked with a woman in Nova Scotia who helped women recover from domestic violence, and then I got certified in her modality, so there was a lot of transference of ability. But when it came to painting the soldiers, I had no evidence that them sitting for a portrait was going to help them. I just knew intuitively, like, I see you, I honor you, this is for you, that would help because it would show that I cared. And literally that one soldier said, and that's what keeps us going. So I just went to the source.
Hi, I'm Halia, and I sat next to you at the Action Summit. I'm realizing it now, and I thank you for reaching out and inviting me. But one thing I noted at that brief moment that you had sat next to me, and now it is how empathic you are. Extremely empathic, and I'm wondering how you manage that for yourself, because I'm struck and I'm ready to fall apart, and I can feel that in you. So I'm just wondering how you do that, how you manage that for yourself. And it's incredible what you do for others. It's just so moving, but it must affect you.
Yes. I wasn't really thinking about how it would affect me when I went there. I just sort of, yeah, whatever. But now I have friends who live there and, you know, I care deeply. The best thing I can do at this point is take a good vacation and just have no stimulus. I didn't really have that opportunity last year because all these other incredible opportunities kept presenting themselves. And I thought, oh, you know, I can't just blow that off because I'm having a sad day. Like, no. I think about the guys at the front and what they deal with every day and civilians living there every day. And it really puts your own stress into perspective. But I am looking forward to a mini vacation. And the act of painting the soldiers was so proactive that it was a kind of form of protection, I would say. What's next for me after a mini vacation is my goal all along has been to take images of the watercolors, which I've photographed full frame, and translate them into large oils. Because we're so used to just scrolling past things, you know, on our phone. But if somebody walks into a museum and they see 20 of these guys this tall staring at them, you can't scroll past that. And I think that will elicit empathy. So my activism, which is what I'm going to call it now, is a lot of what's protecting me, being proactive. Yeah.
So this plays on that kind of question she asked is, do you find that when you go and, like, say you're painting the soldiers and you're showing them, I see you, I gift you, this is your art, has your doing art for others impacted your own healing with your own, like, your art is allowing them some form of healing, but are you able then to create your own artwork to help yourself heal through that process, if that makes sense?
I would say yes. I was very careful to make sure that my nervous system was regulated when I would sit down with one of these gentlemen in case they were stressing so that their body could co-regulate to my system. And these guys were incredibly regulated. I mean, the first guy I painted, I literally started crying, and immediately I said, listen, I'm not sad. I'm in complete awe of you. Like, you were doing so well. He was so present. He was so just there, having a good time. He was flirting a little bit. You know, I'm like, okay, you're fine. Like, you're going to be fine. But there was one soldier who had lost a leg, and I could tell he was a little not grounded. And he had, when I said, you know, you look good, you look happy, he'd say, do I look okay? And I thought, okay, this one, I need to just stay very grounded. And at one point, he brought a translator over, and he spoke to her, and she said to me, tell her that she's healing me. And I said, well, tell him I have a mini Putin in my family. So as I'm healing him, he's healing me. Because we heal in community. You're welcome.